Arteta! What a strike! What a screamer!
Zola! And a fantastic goal! Arsenal back in it!
And here's Limpar, lines it up, finds the net. Arsenal in front.
Final day proves exciting and historic as League and Arsenal fans in particular witnessed something everyone thought would never happen. Arsenal winning away. This is the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. My name is Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. An away victory. We have to place this in historical context. I think we'll try to do that during this pod and just generally really sum up what it's like to watch the Arsenal win away. I'm not aware of anything else historic that happened on the day, so we'll just stay focused on that. There's a lot of good stuff to talk about from the game, which I wasn't expecting. So here's how we'll do this podcast. We will talk about the game because this is called the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. We'll do some sort of season summary stuff, but I want to do a separate podcast dedicated to the league season. I think that makes a lot more sense. So we're not going to sum everything up in this pod because as it is, we're already 50 seconds in and I haven't even introduced the guest. So you can kind of tell how the pacing is going to go. So we have a special Patreon podcast coming out later this week called Top 4. Befitting Arsenal, who did not finish in the top 4, but you'll see what it's all about. There'll be some social interaction and stuff, and it should be a lot of fun, so keep an eye out for that. And obviously, we'll have a lot of stuff leading into the Europa League final, season summary stuff, player awards, and all that kind of stuff. So it should be fun. Still plenty of hashtag content to talk about, but let's talk about the game. And before we do that, I should probably introduce the people who are going to be talking about it. The whole gang is here, so that's easy enough. Paul's on Twitter at Pause Into My Pants. Hello, Pause.
Woohoo.
Clive's on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello.
And Tim's on Twitter at Stoberto. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
Hello there, indeed. So, interesting. Tim, I'll start with you. I think there was a lot of teeth gnashing, hand-wringing, mainly by me, about what this lineup should look like in the context of having a Europa League final coming up. And we did see a lot of young players. We did see, I think, a pretty good selection in terms of protecting the key players from causing themselves any problems. I really think there's only two notable inclusions in this game. One is Leno, and I think the fact that Leno got this game is conclusive evidence that Czech is going to get the final, in case there was any doubt. On the other is Aubameyang, who obviously wanted to go chase after the Golden Boot, which he wound up getting, or at least tying for. And I think there's nothing that summarizes his season better than the fact that he finishes as a Golden Boot winner and also missed a sitter that could have won it for him outright. Sort of sums up a season. But so unless you want to get into the Leno Czech thing, as far as Aubameyang starting, are you sympathetic to the idea of letting the player go out and try to win the Golden Boot, or is that a risk we shouldn't have taken?
Yeah, no, I'm sympathetic to that idea. I think it's been really obvious all season that it really means something to him, right down to like taking the penalties, even when Lacazette's on the pitch. You know, Lacazette hasn't taken a penalty this season. And so I think it's always been quite obvious that, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he's not taken one for quite a long time, actually. And I think there were a couple where Lacazette wasn't on the pitch anyway. But, I think it's difficult to... I think it's been really obvious for a little while that he really, really wanted this. And I can't really explain why, other than in the last month or two in particular, I think he's looked even more desperate to score goals than usual. Usually I kind of think goals just happen for Aubameyang because he's so good at finding space. But the last couple of months or so, I've sensed that kind of I don't want to say desperation. I don't think it's been that bad, but that he really wants this, and it was really obvious on the day as well. He was, right at it from the very, very start, looking for the ball constantly. And I always expected him to play because of that. I always expected that he'd say, "Let me try and get the Golden Boot," and even. Or just like get the 30 goals for the season. I think that's another kind of target that he had, and he kind of, I suppose he kind of got both of them. I'm a little bit dubious about the idea of tying for the Golden Boot, but and so the lineup was pretty much what I expected, to be honest. And I think my only issue was maybe when Mavropanos went off injured. I was quite not surprised, but I didn't want Koscielny to come on because
I think my exact tweet was "not Kos!" !
Yeah. And because you could see the way Burnley were doing their usual, Ashley Barnes throwing his weight around and then whinging every 5 minutes.
Yeah, they were really chippy.
Yeah, and honestly, it reflects in their crowd. Like, if there's a world booing championships between Stoke and Burnley, like, honestly, like
if you had to watch that kind of football every week, you'd boo too.
It's just, but it's very. They're so like they remind me of like the Brexit Party in UK politics. You know, like just like constantly whiny. It's just like, oh, for God's sake, like, and it's just like, if you're going to go and be a shit house and everything, and you know, push people around and dig your elbow in and grab shirts and all of that. And by the way, I think Loughton should have been sent off for that tackle on Iwobi. I mean, that to me is, in this day and age, a clear red card. And Mike Dean obviously just couldn't be arsed with it. But just the whining every 2 minutes. So when Mavropanos went down injured, they started chanting, "He's going to cry in a minute," even though like clearly
had to come off.
yeah, and clearly not because of any blow or anything. It was I think it looked like his groin again, which is probably not good. And then when Koscielny came on, they sang without a hint of irony, "He's going to cheat in a minute because of this goal he scored there like 2.5 years ago."
With
and
his
you
hand.
think, yeah, and you're like, 1 minute you're chanting they're going to cry in a minute, and then you start crying about something that happened 2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
And I know that's a really big divergence from your question, but I had to get that in.
I'm glad you did, because it was better than my question and I enjoyed it thoroughly. But that gives me a chance to turn it over to Paul. Look, I don't think the issue of playing Aubameyang is one that we have to litigate too thoroughly, because at the end of the day, he didn't get hurt and it's fine. I think, having a player be hungry to score goals and win personal accolades is fine if it's not hurting the team, and also can motivate a player. And do you really want to piss Aubameyang off by saying, "No, I'm not risking you," and he loses the golden boot by a goal or two, and then he's brooding? Like, I think it's all good. He's got two strikers to keep happy this season, and he's done it pretty well. I don't have a problem with it. But Paul, as far as Aubameyang's performance, he's just scintillating for him. And I agree with Tim. This game, by the end of the game, you could just tell everybody was looking to try to get him that goal. And he should have had it. I mean, he had sitters that he missed, which sums up his season. But for me, it's more than just about how much he wanted the goal. It's the form he's in off the ball, the work he's doing to win the ball back, and then, of course, the movement. He's really in his best form of the season right now, and I thought he had a fantastic game. How about you?
Yeah, I thought so too. And I don't think we should overlook, beyond the impact it had on PEA himself, the impact it has on the club, the fans, the squad morale, the who we are as a club, to have a guy who's Golden Boot winner sharing with his buddies over at Liverpool, which is kind of impressive. They have two of them, but hey, let's not be jealous here. Because, in a season in which everything's kind of begun to slide backwards and there's plenty to question about quality and blah, 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 we have, in a difficult season, a Golden Boot winner who's arguably certainly one of the best strikers in the league, and in the debate for best strikers. So, and we're off to Baku with a Golden Boot winner. So if you were making a calculation from the club standpoint, it's not just about, let's keep him fit. You got to have some good mojo behind you, and I think it provided a lot on that side of things. I think he's been superb. I think, in particular, the partnership with Lacazette and him, and maybe that's why he's being superb, although we didn't see much of Lac in this game. It wasn't necessarily, PEA had lots of chances. Maybe that was a little bit to do with an end of season game rather than chance creation or whatever. But partly the most exciting thing about PEA's best form of the season is the fact that Lacazette's been a part of it, especially recently, and he's really zeroing in, and that partnership's going to be key in Baku. So I think it's all good.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Clive, he's a really special player that I just think has been super misunderstood for large stretches of this season. And you get to the end of the season and boom, he's tied for the Golden Boot. Misses stick in people's minds. I mean, even in a game where he scored a brace, played brilliantly, and gets himself level for the Golden Boot, a lot of the talk after the game was the sitter he missed, to win the Golden Boot outright. Do you think Arsenal fans have appropriately adapted their understanding of Aubameyang's skill set to really be able to evaluate him. I mean, this is a player who just gets an extraordinary number of very high quality chances and misses some of them. Are we maybe not fully appreciating how fortunate we are to have a superstar striker who can win a golden boot in a season where Arsenal's basically taking the fewest shots they've taken in 20 years?
I think some of this sensitivity is your own, maybe, Elliot.
Let me rephrase the question. Can you just acknowledge that Lacazette is no Aubameyang, and I have been right from the start? How about that? Can we just put it that way?
I think on your timeline, because you love the player, you made it a bit sensitive. Yeah. I think I don't think you need to be a rocket scientist to work out. We've got two good forwards. Yeah, he's taken a bit of, for me, I just think I think they on occasion can play on their own when they're in tip-top form, either of them, but they just look better together. And I think they're forcing the manager to reappraise his best tactical system. He just realised, well, I've got these two, and they're like basically now bordering on world-class, if not world-class already. And they stand up to anything else in the Premiership, the way they play, the way they work, the way they gel emotionally and on the pitch. I think they are slowly but surely transferring to becoming the cultural leaders on the pitch for the team. I think the fans look to them. I think they sing their names the loudest. I think they are becoming the new culture as we move away from the Ozil and Ramsey and Koscielny type culture that we had before, and allied to Theo Walcott and Giroud, etc. That's been the previous sort of leaders on the pitch, with obviously Alexis in there as well. And now we're moving to this new phase. And at the moment, these two are the ones that are most ready. We've got a couple other younger ones not quite ready, and we've got some older players in departure lounge, right? So they own it at the moment, and they are showing it in everything they do, and they are forcing us to accept them as a pair. They're forcing the manager to accept them as a pair, and if we keep doing what we did in the last few games, then especially in Europe, then none of us have any complaints about that. None of us at all. So I think the guy is very, very good. Yes, he misses chances, but so does every other striker. But we as fans tend to look at the last thing a player does, the output, the last pass, the last cross, the last shot. We have a definite recency bias with that. And I think you have to look at the overall player performance and influence. And when you look at that, his influence has really gone up in the last few weeks. And we missed him. We had that sinus problem. That was critical. I think critical for top four in particular. But hey, here we are, and he's in top shape.
Yeah, you know what? I didn't even really think of that, but gosh, things could have been very different. I mean, Clive, before I go into Tim, just real quick, help me, because that's really what this podcast is about. It's basically just therapy for me. It's hard. I look at it and I see us win this game, and I look at the table, and it just feels like a huge missed opportunity. Does it feel that way to you? I mean, is it a huge missed opportunity?
Yeah, well, I just tweeted out Crystal Bloody Palace. I think I got about 4 million replies.
What about Brighton and Bloody Hove, Bloody Albion?
Well, this is it, right? So I just tweeted out, to me, Crystal Palace was the one, right? And that was the one game which I expected us to do something in. But then everyone came back and said Brighton, they said Aubameyang's penalty miss, and they went for a whole list of issues which are important to them. And I think, wow, okay, when it comes down to it, during the season, there are going to be multiple missed opportunities. But this one does feel a bit painful at the moment, and we all are hopeful that the 29th will fix this. But if it doesn't, all those issues are going to become massive. They're going to really grow in our minds, right? So, again, I said a long time ago, if I could pick a route from a fan perspective to qualify for Champions League, I choose Europa League all day long. However, there's a hell of a lot of risk associated to that. We're playing a Chelsea team which they're not a charity, right? They're not going to give us nothing. So yeah, we got a problem coming up. We got a problem coming up, and we got to overcome it. But hey, look, here's what it is. We know we messed up. We know we've messed up massively. We know we have mentality issues. I'm no doubt we'll talk a lot about this in the summer, about how we develop this squad, how we develop personnel, and what issues we're trying to fix for the next season. I think we really have to focus on delivering under pressure.
Yeah.
And that's key for us.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to win the games that don't matter. We've proven that over the years. Tim, well, before I turn it over to you, I want to just read out a 7 a.m. kickoff stat, just to put in perspective what Aubameyang and Lacazette have meant to this team. Aubameyang scored or assisted 27 Premier League goals and 10 Europa League goals, 37 total goals in all competitions, or well, not all competitions, the league in Europe. Lacazette, 22 scored or assisted in the league, 7 scored or assisted in Europe, 29. So 37 and 29 goal contributions in the league in Europe from our two strikers. I mean, you can say that it wasn't great squad building to dump £100 million on 2 strikers in the span of 2 windows, and I wouldn't disagree with you. But you'd also say you'd be hard-pressed to spend that money on better output than what we've gotten, and good Lord, where would we be without them? Tim, I think we have an issue here in that I want to draw conclusions from this game, but it's hard to know whether you should draw conclusions from a game that matters so little to both teams and where you don't know how seriously they're taking it. The conclusion I want to draw is this. This is not by any means a great lineup. Mavropanos wasn't very good. Lichtsteiner is obviously garbage. You've got El Neni and Guendouzi in midfield, but now it's listed as a 4-2-3-1. To me, it felt like a 4-3-3. I love the way it looked. I love the way Aubameyang looks as a center forward with 2 wide players on either side. Iwobi had arguably the worst first half you can imagine from a player, came back and had a phenomenal second half. I just love seeing us with 3 in midfield, Tim. I can't help it. It feels like it is the way a big club needs to play against smaller sides. So I'm curious, is it fair to draw any conclusions from what we did in this game? And if so, what conclusions can you draw?
Yeah, I think that's quite a fair conclusion, actually. And you look at some of the pieces that came out. So, like you say, Elneny and Guendouzi, this is, I suppose, as much if there was any consternation possible over this game, really, the real consternation was, oh God, it's Elneny and Guendouzi again. But I think you're right, it was more of a midfield 3, and actually they both looked better because effectively Elneny was just the one kind of sitting, doing that like half centre-back, half central midfielder thing that he does. And he wasn't really asked to do an awful lot more than that. He wasn't asked to be the any kind of creative force. And I thought he did that quite well. And yeah, it just leaves Guendouzi to just buzz around.
Shuttle around. He was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I think suits him. I think kind of a lot of the difficulty for a lot of people in evaluating Guendouzi is we can't pin down what he is. And it's a bit like, is he a deep lying? Is he a number 8? Is he a number 6? Is he a number 4? I've seen all these arguments about whether he's a defensive midfielder, and people are saying, oh no, of course he's not. But then it's like, oh, look at his stats. He doesn't have, a single goal contribution this season. And I think the thing is, in truth, at the moment, he's not any of those things. And I think that's kind of fine. I'm quite happy for him to shuffle around and, kind of get involved as and where he wants, because he's quite a high involvement player as well. And I personally, I quite like that. I think he's better like that than when there's a very definite 2. And we can play that very definite 2. Well, I think we kind of have to play that very definite 2 when Xhaka plays, because we all know what he's going to do. He's going to sit in front of the defence and he's there to distribute, but he can't run. So he has to have someone next to him. We've seen the cost of not playing anyone next to him. So we sit someone next to him. But then that makes their role a little bit not that well defined, I don't think. Because, if you're Guendouzi there, what do you do? Do you shuffle around still? Do you go left to right? Do you have to, you kind of have to get out of Xhaka's way a little bit. And I think that's a little bit complicated. And, if you're Torreira, it's the same deal. It's a bit like, right, I'm shuffling around you. But it's almost like, Xhaka has become like the sun in the midfield. And if you fly too close to him, the old Icarus thing. And actually sometimes when you have a player that fixed, it can get in the way a little bit, depending on who else you have around him. And I do think at times Guendouzi and Torreira have looked slightly unsure of their roles next to Xhaka because his role is so fixed. And I actually really like this. I thought it was El Nene's best game in ages. It was Guendouzi's best game in ages. And I think you're right. I thought Iwobi was excellent in the second half, and it just looked like it had a little bit more definition, a little bit more structure. Because I think the thing is, when you have super structured players, and it's the same when you have a really, really fixed number 9, and actually neither of our number 9s are like that. They both kind of move around in different areas. When you have a really fixed player like that, so it robs you of a bit of fluidity, basically. So yeah, I liked it, and look, it's the way that all the kind of bigger clubs play, and I'm sure it's what Emery will try and transition towards. Yeah,
I totally agree with that, and I think there's a couple things to be taken in context here. First of all, the game didn't mean anything. Second of all, Burnley always sit deep. You're gonna have possession. They do concede shots. They try to suppress good chances, but exchange that for lesser chances. But we had 17 shots. This is a team that averages 11 shots away. I thought the distances were what looked better, especially when we played smaller teams in the back three away, and it's Xhaka and Guendouzi, and there's no one to stitch it together, and it winds up being an Ozil or someone either dropping deep to try to collect, and there's no connection. The Willock Guendouzi thing, we sort of stretched vertically across the pitch much more naturally. And while the game was more open, and I'm not saying we were like defensively super solid, I just like the way our attack progressed up the pitch in a more natural way. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the crucial word you used there was connection. And again, I spoke to the Arsenal women manager Joe Montemuro last week, like quite in depth about his kind of tactical philosophy,
champion,
as it were.
Arsenal women, yeah.
And and you know, it was quite an interesting conversation. It made me think of Emery a lot, because when Joe first came in, he fixed the starting lineup. And then after that, now he makes lots of tweaks, but he kind of said the core principles are always the same. They've got a core there. They know that if they just do the basics, they'll get a result. But we add 2 or 3 things in every game, but it's important for them to believe in the core. But the other thing he said that was very interesting was, my only rule with how we set up is that there are never 2 players in a straight line when we have the ball. There always has to be like a connection. There always has to be a pass available, and that means I don't want anyone standing next to each other when we've got the ball, so that we can progress it up the pitch. And I really thought about that a lot watching this game, because like you say, I thought we did that much better.
Yeah, that's a really, really good insight, and I totally agree with that. So Paul, I mean, I think that we can start to get into some of the individual contributions. We don't have to spend forever on this match, but you know, for me, obviously, I was looking to see how a player like Willock performs, because I think we are going to have an issue of some midfield availability next season with Ramsey going and maybe wanting to play a 3 more often. And while we may target that in the market, it's always interesting to think about who could fill that role that's in the squad. Maitland-Niles would obviously be a potential candidate, although he's going to have to start the season at right back anyway. So what did you think of Willock's performance and the possibility that he could be ready to take a growing role in the center of our midfield next season?
I thought he was great. Asterisk on the game and everything, but it's not a performance out of context. He's been great for the under-23s by all accounts, and the 4-minute videos I see, he always seems to come to the fore in those. When he's the little things he's done for us in Europa League or in the CC Cup. He's looked a different player this year, like confidence has come to him, and he's really starting to express himself, and he sees himself as more. I mean, it's interesting. Of the 3, he's the one who's pushed forward, and is playing that progressive, aggressive role up front, pressing. I mean, he's very often the guy closest to Aubameyang, and so he's got a significant role to play there. And he does it very nicely. And so I guess what you take out of it, with all the usual caveats on all the young players who didn't come through in the end, who were close but no cigar, is he certainly looks like he's a candidate with a good pre-season coming up here, that he should be even more part of the squad. We need a player of some substance to replace Ramsey, and it won't be a like for like, because he's kind of a one-off. He's his own enigma, as we've known over the years. So you're not looking for a Ramsey, but you're certainly looking to bring a force in midfield in to supplement. If we keep Xhaka and Guendouzi and Torreira, we've seen that's not enough yet, unless we do some magic in terms of how we play or how we set up. We need somebody else. I think Willock's job is to come in and compete against all those guys. It's not like he won't get used if he's ready. So hopefully next year is a year he steps up and works out which one of those guys jobs he wants. And that could still be 2 or 3 years off, but I thought he was really good, and he's just got a presence about him, and he's the Willock of the 3 Willocks. I think we had all 3 at one stage, but he's the Willock that looks like he'll make it. So he just needs to keep going, but he seems to, as I remembered him a year or 2 ago, he was very loose with the ball and loose touches and stuff, and now he's just a much more confident, complete young player. But, I mean, he's still really young, so.
Physically looks pretty strong to me. He has an eye for goal.
Yeah.
I mean, he had a couple of shots in this game. He wasn't super active, only 13 of 15 passing, but, I thought he got into some good positions and helped stitch things together. The problem is people project so much about young players. Like Mavropanos, everybody back in January was thinking he could be the savior. I think people have much more realistic expectations for him now. I have people...
giant gooner.
Yeah, that guy. Matt is a huge fan. I think he just was kind of projecting. I think there might be some Greek connection there. But, you look at people like coming to me on Twitter as we talk on Twitter a lot about, what's going to happen in the midfield going forward. And people are like, oh, Emil Smith-Rowe could come in and be a starter. And it's like, these are people that have played basically no first-team minutes that we're just projecting to now be the answer in a position. And while they could be at some point, we've seen what a massive step up that is in quality. And it's hard to know who will make it. We've seen Willock a little bit, and I think he's impressed for the most part. Can he make a more regular step into the first team? I think it's a big ask, but we'll see what happens. I think
about to be 20 years old in August.
Yeah, I mean he's Guendouzi's age, and Guendouzi is sort of a unicorn in terms of the amount of minutes he played at his age. Clive, a player that divides opinion within me is Alex Iwobi. I thought this was a very Alex Iwobi game because I thought he was absolute hot garbage in the first half. And in the second half, he was arguably our best player. He has the physical strength to hold the ball up. I thought a lot of Leno's out balls went to Iwobi and they stick. And it's so impressive how he can put his back into a player and hold the ball. He had a lot of good moves where he was able to beat guys down the wing. And in the first half, he was giving the ball away left, right, and center, making crosses out in a touch and generally not getting it right. In the second half, he had an eye for a pass. He had one really clever ball between the center back and the fullback into the channel or into the penalty area that Aubameyang just didn't get on the end of. That was a really good pass. I mean, he is a bit of an enigma. As we start to think about the summer and the needs, I think wide forward is a need that most people expect us to look at. So what's your take on Iwobi's future at the club and the kind of season he's had?
Yeah, he is a complex topic, right?
So, he sure is. He's an enigma wrapped in a conundrum, wrapped in a mystery.
He really is. And whatever I say right now can be argued, and that's part of the problem, because what is he? What is he a wide forward? Because if he's a wide forward, he's not Sterling, so we slag him for that. Is he a number 10? Well, if he's not Ozil, so we slag him for that. Some people say he should play deeper. He's played deeper on a couple of occasions, done really well, but doesn't get the opportunity to do it very often. So he played wide left in a 4-2-3-1 primarily, like he did in this game. I sometimes think he plays too far left. I think he needs to play on the interior a little bit more. And so Tim mentioned a few pods ago, which I've been thinking about a lot since, is playing that middle role when we have two strikers, that player in behind. And I would really like to see him in that role. I think he's becoming quite easily read on his right foot off that left-hand touchline. I think he's becoming this a muscle memory that he's not developing. He's doing the same things. He's getting it. He's striding forward. He's shuffling in. And he's looking for a pass. He's either going to go on the outside, low cross, or on the inside, a little reverse pass. He doesn't take enough shots. So his game is not developing, really. So we all know what he's going to do. And if we all know what he's going to do, the other teams know what he's going to do. That role in behind two strikers, he could potentially do that. He's got the power to receive it back to goal. And when he's running at you down the centre of the pitch, he's now got the ability to go both ways. So he becomes a problem. He becomes a problem there. But he hasn't got the confidence to have an outside of the box shot yet, unless he has no time to think about it. He's not selfish enough. He doesn't quite have the personality to say, I'm not passing to you, I'm going to roof this from here. He's got the ability, but having the ability and not having the personality to extract that ability is two different things. So he is a player. He is not a problem for Arsenal. We have 30-year-old high-wage problems at this club that are not homegrown, which are far bigger than this lad. I do feel, though, we have to decide what he's going to be. Is he going to be, with Maitland-Niles, the James Milners of this squad? Or are we going to fix him to a position and say, we're now going to judge you here, and we're going to play you here, and when you can't play here, you won't play? Now, I'm of the opinion that this manager likes Swiss Army knives, and we have one in Iwobi, and I think we could develop him more in that way, and we can do the same with Maitland-Niles. But I do think he's doing fine. I think with him, it's all in the head. Don't be a player that's happy to make it to Arsenal's first team. Be a player that wants to influence Arsenal's first team, really influence it on a consistent basis, and not when you've just been dropped for a few weeks. Get in there, stay in there, and dominate, and not let anyone take your shirt off. And that's what I will be saying to him. But at the moment, he's a bit in and out, and he seems happy with that, which I don't like. I was at the game the other week, and I was watching him at halftime with all the other substitutes, and he looked too happy to be on the bench to me. And that would annoy me. I don't be happy being on the bench.
Is it okay if I'm happy that he's on the bench?
It's sort of things you spot, and I'll be thinking, if it's my own son, I'll be giving him a good doing on that one. Don't be so happy. Make sure you let everyone know you want to play. Make sure you play. Don't be happy not playing. And when you get an opportunity to play, make sure you can't be ignored.
Yeah.
Can I just add to that very quickly? I would love that if you would, yes. I think that's quite interesting because what I really think turned Iwobi's performance when Scott Loughton put that tackle on him and should have been sent off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he booted him. Didn't he?
Yeah.
He got angry at him. Didn't he?
Angry, yeah. I've not seen that before from him. And then, he got angry and he got angry, like justifiably. It was an awful tackle that should have been a red card. And he got angry with the referee. And then the next time the ball came to Loughton, he just body checked him off the pitch. And then there was just a little moment between them where they'd obviously, been giving it the verbals. And Iwobi just he did the Hulk pose because it just knocked him off the ball. And you look at Iwobi and you think you could knock a lot of people off the ball, mate. And I thought his and I don't know if it influenced it really, or whether that's just narrative, but it did seem to me that he played much better when he got a bit of a kick and he wanted to make a point.
Ask Hector Bellerin.
It started with an Iwobi nutmeg, which I quite like.
Yeah, ask Hector Bellerin if getting fired up to play a certain player can influence you. I mean, look at him against Marcus Alonso every time he goes up against Chelsea. He's a personal vendetta for the time he elbowed him in the head.
But it is Iwobi's issue. He needs to really apply himself based on what he actually is. He's not a youth player anymore. He's 22, 23. He's got a body of a god. Start laying it on people. Start moving people about.
That was advice I took in my 20s, by the way, and it really helped me. I had the body of a god, and I just need to start laying it on people, and really changed my life.
People, move them, put them into the stands, put them in the advertising.
But he does.
Move them about.
He does. So, all right. So let me ask you this. Let me give Tim a shot at this just real quick. Tim. So, all right, he is tremendously physically strong. He drops into midfield to receive the ball off the goalkeeper. He's kind of playing that Sanya role that we had when Sanya would be the out ball for the keeper for a while there. He can beat one guy. He's not particularly quick. He's not particularly good with the final ball, but it's hard to take it off him. He can hold it up and he can get past a first player. I mean, it just seems overly simplistic, but should we be waiting for this guy to develop a final ball he's never really consistently shown he can have, or should we be putting him in a position in the squad that he can excel at with the traits he's already demonstrating?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm not entirely convinced about the end product thing. I'm not entirely sure it will ever quite be that. I don't see him all of a sudden becoming a 15 goal and assist player.
Yeah, it's never happening.
I think they might go up a little bit, but not too much. I've said quite often that end product is usually the last thing, but I mean, more often than not, it doesn't come at all.
It's very hard. That's why.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're talking about this 4-3-3. I think the thing is, I think we've got a lot of players who suit perhaps the wider positions in the 4-3-3. And I'd quite like to see Iwobi perhaps on the left side of a 4-3-3. In certain games, I'd really like to see what he could do in that position, because that's, like Clive said, we don't really know what he is, and in that position, you're not a number 8, you're not a number 11, like your role's not that defined, and it kind of frees you from this. I must do this, I must do that, because when I watch Iwobi play, I think he plays well. I think he plays well most of the time. What he doesn't have is the end product. That's the frustrating part. I think his performances are generally good, and he gives us something. But I would quite like to see him on the left of that 3. And that's the kind of position where Pogba really made his name at Juventus. And I'm not comparing Iwobi and Pogba per se, but Pogba's another player who I think maybe at a much higher level has that. What is he? Is he a 6? Is he an 8? And actually at Juventus, they kind of not hid him, but they kind of just said, okay, just go off onto the left, so you're not really picked up. And it's the half space, isn't it, basically? That wide midfield role in a 4-3-3. So if we were to go to that formation, I'd be really interested to see what he could do there, because I think he'd have a lot of qualities, and he wouldn't be under pressure for huge defensive contribution, and he wouldn't be under pressure for huge end product either. So if we're talking about his development, that's probably a position I could see him being quite good in.
Yeah, I agree. Look, I mean, his goals, expected goals, and shots per 90 are all sub 50 percentile in the league, playing for a top 6 team. His shots have declined every one of the last 3 seasons. Now, admittedly, the whole team's shots declined, per game shots this season. He's been 3 goals every season for the last 3 seasons, 3 assists, 5 assists, 6 assists. Not terrible, not incredible for a guy starting a lot in a wide forward position. If you look at his XG buildup, XG chain, which are more sort of midfieldish type stats, he's 85, 80, 90 percentile in some of those over the last 3 years. So, again, I don't want to write off that he could ever have end product. I just think that you reach a point where you say, giving him 1,974 minutes as a wide forward to get 3 goals and 6 assists, you have to shit or get off the pot at some point. You can't give 2,000 wide forward minutes to a player with those statistics for a team that has aspirations beyond where we are right now. Clive, not Clive, sorry, Paul, real quick. Why don't you chime in and give us a final word on Iwobi so we can move on?
Look, I haven't always seen him as a midfield player, but it feels like he's hit a bit of a ceiling in the position that he's at. And the major issue I have is he seems pretty predictable for any team who sets up to face him. The one thing that playing on the left of midfield would do for him is when he does pop up in a more attacking position, the other team won't be set for an Iwobi attack. And I just think it'll give him a lot more. It may make him more dangerous as an attacking force if he's not a full-time attacker than if he's kind of in that defined, prescribed role that the other side is waiting for him. It's pretty easy to neutralize Iwobi in 2 games out of 3 if a team sets up for it. And so I think the wide midfielder role will really give him options where he's popping up in lots of different kinds of positions. And we should remember he was the guy who assisted off the Monreal ball into Aubameyang for the second goal today, and that's kind of a popping up from midfield kind of role. So good on him.
Yeah. Well, look, Clive brought up he has the body.
That's a good point.
Yeah. I mean,
I was going to say that's a really good point what Paul's made there. And just to add to it a little bit, I think what he's saying there really is if he plays in as a third midfielder rather than a third forward, he's picking up the ball in broken play. He becomes a transitional player. When he receives the ball as a third forward, we expect Sterling, Sane type skills, 1-on-1. Everything's calm. It's you versus them. And maybe that's not him. Maybe he finds that high pressure. But in broken play, can you imagine his threat striding through the midfield? bringing it to forwards, his connection ability, he could be something else. I think we got to explore it, because if we want to raise our standards, the numbers that you no doubt know, Elliot, are telling us maybe he's not quite top 4 level in that wide forward role. But as a third midfielder, he could be very interesting.
Yeah, the one thing also, and I think this is why fans get on his case a little bit, he gets into some really good positions. He always needs the extra touch or the extra dribble or the extra moment. He is not a first touch player. You know what I mean? And so the ball sort of slows down when it comes to him. And we definitely need players that speed up play. We do not have enough one-touch footballers in our team right now. Players that can get the ball and distribute it, one touch on the turn, off it goes, or, burst straight ahead in a straight line. Iwobi is not a straight line player. Cut it inside, cut it back outside, little stutter step, little head feint, drop the shoulder. I mean, everything seems to take a little extra time when he gets there. And I think especially when you have a center forward like Aubameyang, where everything is based on timing and runs, that can be really frustrating. So I think that's part of the frustration fans have. But look, you said it, he does have the body of a god. And I think when you have a player who has the body of a god, he's someone that you want to see in enclosed lingerie, maybe? I don't know. Does your partner have the body of a god? Even if they don't, I'm sure you'd love to see them in enclosed lingerie. And we know just how to help you with that. We're going to take a break. We're going to tell you about the best damn lingerie you can have sent right to your home without the embarrassment of having to shop for it in a department store or anything like that. So we'll take a break. We'll talk about lingerie. We'll come back and wrap up the season after this. Stay with us. Okay, everyone, it's time to tell you about our friends at Enclosed Lingerie. You can find them online at The Enclosed, ENCLOSED.com. Enclosed Lingerie is a Lingerie of the Month club. That's right, just like a Beer of the Month club, only better, because it's a high-end luxury lingerie gift for you and your partner that's going to enhance the intimacy in your relationship. Right now, if you put in Arsenal at checkout, they're going to give you $35 off any gift from Enclosed Lingerie. So you're going to want to go to theenclosed.com and sign up now. What better way to celebrate the romance in your relationship than celebrating with a gift from The Enclosed? And the gifts keep coming every month. So while it can be difficult to remember to keep the romance, to keep the intimacy in your relationship, The Enclosed has your back. Every month you're going to get that high-end luxury lingerie gift, and it's going to remind you of the importance of romance in your relationship. So do it now. Go to theenclosed.com. There is a perfect fit guarantee, so you never have to worry about the fit. It's beautiful high-end luxury lingerie. Just go to theenclosed.com and enter promo code ARSENAL for $35 off at checkout. Do it now. Okay, we're back, and now that that's sorted out, well, Tim, season's over. Let's do this. I want to give each of you a chance to do this, but as far as the league season goes, maybe you can give me your top 2 or 3 sort of enduring takeaways. Not a whole like laundry list of things, but just quick 30,000-foot view top takeaways from this season in terms of where we are as a club right now in the league.
Yeah, we're about where so I think we finished roughly where our kind of ability, and so I think we've got the 4th or 5th best squad in the Premier League, and I think I predicted 5th at the beginning of the season, and I think that's about where we are. Our context of collapsing and losing 3rd or 4th has to be taken into consideration, but it's been really interesting actually, and not interesting. So like the football hasn't been that entertaining, but it's been interesting just because it's been different. And I was all for that. I've enjoyed this season. Like some of it's been quite tough still, which I was totally expecting, but I've enjoyed this season infinitely more than I enjoyed the 2 that preceded it. Both of which were possibly my 2 least favourite seasons following Arsenal because of the clear kind of drop off and the clear decline and the really badly spent money, and a manager I liked outstaying his welcome, quite frankly, and the kind of resentment that caused. So I've massively preferred this season to the last couple. I think it's been a bit of a mixed season. There are some things we've done well and some things we haven't. I think generally the summer signings that we made, most of them worked out. You can argue about Lichtsteiner, but look, he was bought as backup. and I don't really think we were expecting to get more than we got out of him. To be quite honest, it was probably just a bit unfortunate that Bellerin got such a bad injury. We bought him to play in the Europa League group stage games and the Carabao Cup, and that's largely what he did until Bellerin's injury. But in Maitland-Niles, we probably landed on our feet a little bit there. So I think in that respect, it's been a slightly more enjoyable season. There's been a little bit of change of travel. We spent money fairly well, I think, although the way we conducted January gives me some concerns going forward with the kind of power brokers that are there now, and crucially the one that isn't there. So yeah, it's been a really mixed season, a really curious, completely evolving week to week, different formations, different lineups, which it's all been different, some good different and some bad different. But I was really ready for different, and I think most of us were. So I'm cautiously optimistic about the kind of direction of travel. I think we're in that little group where we can finish anywhere between 3rd and 6th. This year it was 5th. Next year it might be 3rd, might be 6th again, depending on what our competitors do around us. So I think I got about what I expected in the end. But the journey was a mystery to me and proved to be very different, which is an improvement of sorts.
Yeah, there's a lot there. It's a lot to unpack. I think it's going to take time, and unfortunately, I think there's going to be a lot of post hoc analysis, because if we lose the Europa League final, I think a lot of people will go back and say this season was a calamity, and if we win the Europa League final, people will be in a more charitable mood and say there were good things in this season and ultimately was a success. I think the truth, as often does, lies somewhere wherever I say it is. But Paul, let me ask you this. It is true that we absolutely fucked up the end of our season in a way that is heartbreaking, because really this should have been a day where we secured 3rd place instead of played for nothing to finish in 5th, in part hilariously because United lost to Cardiff and they are a disaster. But you can't get into a position where this should have been an easy 3rd place finish without being in position to have it be an easy 3rd place finish. When you look back on this season, will you remember more the good things we did to get into position leading to that Palace game? Or do you think that the season will ultimately be defined for you by the way we shit the bed at the end?
So when they've done studies of people going to the dentist, the final amount of pain is the amount of pain they remember. So it's actually better not to stop a painful procedure suddenly. It's better to kind of reduce their pain by about 50%, because that's kind of the pain they register. We will remember the shitting the bed more strongly than any other part of the season.
Is it fair?
No, it's not, because everybody else shit the bed. We just did it bigger.
We had more shit in us. We just had a bigger dinner, and then it came out on the bed. This is all very, very disgusting. Please change analogies.
And I think but I was wearing some really nice lingerie when I did it. I think
no.
I think the
that
final
was hopefully
game
from those bastards at the Disclosed that you mentioned last episode.
Driving their sails.
Oh God.
So I think maybe it's not something I should distract myself with, but I think there's been a lot of BS about the final game of the season. The final game of the season shows blah blah blah, and I don't think the final game of the season showed anything even for our competitors. As Clive says, I think the turning point was Crystal Palace, because at that stage we pretty much had it in our hands, and the stuff that happened after that, even Brighton Hove Albion, that would have put us right back in the mixer. But your competitors can respond too. So Crystal Palace was the turning point for me. Stuff that happened earlier in the season, Aubameyang missing a penalty against Spurs, I get that. But again, we were as we've shown, we were well capable of blowing any advantage from that period back there. I do think it was heartening that the 22 game run or whatever it was, I never found that convincing because the performances weren't there, but it talked to a certain stability in the squad and a certain hanging in there-ness, but also plenty of luck and plenty of week fixtures. It was the phase when Ramsey was there. Ramsey came back and Ozil was being reintegrated, where we all started to think, hang on, this was what we were hoping for. It took a little while to get there. Well, now it's poof, gone in a jiffy. And my major take, you could say it's all down to Ramsey. Maybe it is. I'm not a smart enough football analyst to say.
Hard agree. Yeah,
player.
Agreed. Oh, sorry. What?
Yeah, you bitch. Whereas I tend to lean on the main takeaway I have from this season is football's complicated. I haven't heard one explanation of why we weren't good enough or why we were good when we were good. That makes me feel comfortable. Obviously, you can say, well, we need better personnel and we need blah, blah, blah. Well, we're going to struggle to get much better personnel than we had this year. We're losing Ramsey. We don't have loads of money unless I'm misreading things.
I don't think you're going to struggle to get better personnel in central defense. Let's be clear about that.
Well, I think we are, because you got to buy them, right?
Yeah, but I mean, like if all we had, so we lost Holding to an injury, but like if we had let's say an other player who isn't Mustafi and isn't Mavropanos, I don't think they have to be Virgil van Dijk. We're a lot better just with that. Like if Holding stays fit, we're better, you know?
But I mean, Holding had his travails too before it settled down. But I mean, while I wouldn't fully disagree with you. I just don't think it's a magic pill. We'll bring in a better, more centre-back-ish centre-back, and we'll be wondering why our defence isn't fixed, because it's a lot more than one.
Okay.
You know, when we had Socrates and Koscielny, we're like, oh yeah, we got it made. Didn't quite turn out that way though, did it? We were still fucking leaking goals against teams we shouldn't have. Football's complicated, and it's a process, and you know, this is just one more season that convinced me there are no easy answers. It's really look at what Spurs does with very, very fucking average players. And it took Pochettino a while to get it going. And, you know, he was in the English league a little while before he got to Spurs. So it's a process. But then you don't know, how long do you give a manager? Well, he's getting another season. But how long does it take for a manager to click and for the teams to get the message and to get the spacings? And then you change some personnel, but we haven't got a lot of budget. I've got lots of questions for... and undecided as to whether things get better next year. There'll be some changes. We should get better, but it's a really tough fucking job.
Yeah,
coaching a team in the Premier League when you're around the number 4, number 5 team, but you've a lot less budget than everybody but Spurs.
And can I add, like, really, really quickly on the, you know, this kind of area of the Premier League, 3rd to 6th, and there's been this kind of, because of the recency bias, it's like, oh, they're all shit, they're all rubbish. And I heard Michael Cox on another football podcast last week, kind of doing quite a good defence actually of them, saying, well, actually, if you look in Europe at the moment, Man United are the only English team who went out to a European team. So these guys have been beating everybody, and actually they're the ones who are still in Europe and still contending with European campaigns, which has probably contributed to their league form going down the Swanee a bit. And they're all finishing like on 70 plus points, which, you know, obviously is knocked into the shade by what Liverpool and Man City have done, but that's still, to have like 4 Premier League teams who are I think Man U were in like the high 60s and the rest, you know, in the 70s, like that actually means they're all of a very high level. And if you compare them to 3 to 6 in La Liga and Serie A, there's not really much comparison. So we're in England, we're perhaps a bit of a crossroads, but in Europe, ironically, having been out the Champions League for a couple of years, we're actually operating at quite a high level, which is why we're in a European final.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. I mean, look, we hate Chelsea, and we hate Chelsea, and we hate Tottenham, and we hate Tottenham, we hate Manchester United, and all that stuff. But like Chelsea, Tottenham, Arsenal, Manchester United, it's 4 teams for 2 spots, and none of them are great teams. They're all flawed, but they're all very, very good teams. They really are. Yeah. I mean, 3 of the 4 are in European finals, as you pointed out. I think the thing for me that is a big takeaway from this season is just looking at the amount of goals we conceded and the expected goals we conceded in particular, just an avalanche of expected goals against. And I think what you have to look at is you have to say, okay, here's the reality. Okay, we conceded a mountain of goals, but we didn't play particularly buccaneering, front-footed football. And maybe what Emery will learn from this season, when you look at Manchester City, who concedes by far the fewest chances in the league, they don't do it by just having the best defenders, although they really do have the best everything because of the money they spend. But they do it through tremendous amounts of possession and an immense amount of pressure put on the opposition in the final third in the attacking half. And that the way you protect your defense when you're a big club and get 3 points week in, week out when you're a big club. Liverpool lost once. They drew 7 times. City lost 4 times. All right? Chelsea only lost 8. City drew twice. So the way you do this is you go win games. And the way you go win games is you rack up 95 goals scored on 93 XG, which is what City did. And again, you do that by spending £1 billion. I get it. But you do it by pressing, being front-footed, dominating possession, putting 8 guys in the attacking half against smaller teams and believing that they cannot resist, that their irresistible force their immovable object can be moved by your irresistible force or something like that. Let me ask you a really complex question, Clive, because you are the great thinker of the group. I think I speak on behalf of all of us when I say that.
No.
Well, okay. I definitely don't speak on behalf of the wizardry and intellect of Paul. Tim, do you want to weigh in on that? Clive is a great thinker of the group. Also disagree?
No comment.
No comment. Okay. All right, Clive, I think that you are a great thinker. The other podcast members, not as convinced, but putting that to one side. The question I want to ask you is about sort of our status in the league right now. Liverpool and City are clearly on another level right now, and they probably will be for a few more seasons. It sort of looks like that's the case. And you look at the gap in points. I mean, from third to second is 25 points. It's a massive gap. But if you were to look at all of these teams, let's assume for a second that Tottenham lose the Champions League final because dear fucking God, okay? So let's assume that for a second. Liverpool, Chelsea, Tottenham, Arsenal, United. Which club do you think is actually in the worst situation right? I mean, Arsenal fans complain a lot, we cry a lot, we moan a lot, we think our club is really poorly run, and we have reason to think all of those things. Is it possible, though, that those other 3 clubs are in as bad or worse situations than we are, and we just don't notice it because we're not them?
Yeah, I look at them a lot, particularly Spurs, and I think organisationally Spurs have not changed that much. They have now got their own single point of failure in Pochettino. He's been the one that's been the player developer. I mean, their situation this year, give an example, they lose Winks and they lose Dembele. And you're thinking, okay, I didn't rate Harry Winks, but at least he can pass the ball in midfield. Dyer's injured. You're thinking, what can they do here? They're in trouble. They find a joke of a player, their record signing in Sissoko, and they turn him into a centre midfielder by not actually playing the ball through midfield, playing second ball football, and creating a midfield that becomes a running race. And guess what he can do? He can run. Suddenly, he's the most influential player of the year player. And I think that's very smart coaching, how you develop away from your weaknesses. So Pochettino has become so crucial to them, as Wenger was many, many years ago to Arsenal. So that model needs to be looked at. So that could be broken literally in a couple of weeks, because he could easily walk away.
Oh, yeah, he will.
Manchester United have no football organisation. They have money men in charge of the football side. Their revenues are like double everyone else's, so they can afford to throw away tens of millions. But even their fans are looking around and thinking, this is rubbish. Our best players are overpaid, more worried about goal bonuses than actually playing football. So they have a problem organisationally, they have a problem squad-wise. They don't have a problem cash-wise. But they do have an ownership which is taking cash out of that club and borrowing against that club. So they are teetering, and they have this noisy neighbour across the street that has better run, as much money, many more trophies, the best manager in the world. And if they rebuild their squad at centre forward and centre midfield next year and maybe add a left back, then we're all in trouble. Right? So that just shuts the door completely. Chelsea, I think Chelsea have lucked to that position massively. If we had their European draw, we would have come third. I think managing Napoli and managing Valencia, that's what the manager tried to do, and that's where it went wrong. The Everton game, the Watford game, the Palace game was all around those tougher European games. Was Chelsea had a real buy in their rounds, and they could afford to focus on the league to get just enough points to pip us. I think that was a critical issue. So I think Chelsea's a bit of a mirage, and hopefully on the 29th we actually show that. I think if the crucial moment for Chelsea, this is how league seasons are defined on fine lines, they were losing 1-0 to Cardiff. They were about to lose that game. 2 massive refereeing decisions cost Cardiff those 3 points. The Chelsea fans were calling for Sarri's head. A 1-0 defeat turns into a 2-1 victory in the last 5 minutes. Those 3 points, critical. They could have lost their manager and it all could have gone to pot. And that's how fine the line is. So from an Arsenal perspective, we're a little bit of a false dawn type club. We have the structure in place. Then we lost a couple of key kegs. So now we're not sure if we have got a structure in place. We have a half structure in place with new people coming. We don't really know what our new sole owner represents, so we've got a good guess. We don't know level of investment for next year. We do know that the manager had a problem with defence and attack, and the club decided to back him with an attacking midfielder. So we missed the opportunity to backfill the fact we had 2 season-ending injuries in defence and 1 in attack. So that was a crucial moment. So who's making the decisions there? So at the moment with Arsenal, we are caught between cultures. We're caught between the Wenger culture and we're caught between this new culture that's not quite defined yet. And that has been epitomised in the dealings with Ozil this season. I think the manager tried to manage him and then he realised he didn't have any more quality in his squad. He had to go back to him. And then we've now introduced a bit of the old Arsenal towards the end of the season. And now we're sort of caught between saying what he was trying to achieve versus this is what I have to achieve. I have to get us to a point to create a platform for me to build trust, to get revenue so I can take this team forward. I think we're going to see the real Emery and the real Arsenal next season, but I'm not sure what that looks like. But I tell you what, we will know what it looks like and we can then opine on it. So to go back to your original question, I think we are slightly ahead of Manchester United and slightly ahead of Chelsea. And I think Tottenham are at the top of the crest at the moment. Their 30-year-olds are no longer signing contracts for $5,000 a week extra. They are waiting. So what's going to happen to Alderweireld? Well, Vertonghen's getting old. Eriksen's looking out the window. Danny Rose is getting a bit older. Trippier's dropped off a cliff. Dyer looks like a wardrobe that can't move. They've got problems there. They need revenue to rebuild that squad. They've lucked their way to the final with pure character and fight, and good luck to them in that. I hope all I hope is 2 teams in red wins those European tournaments, which we all hope for. And I think they're going to reach their ceiling very, very quickly. And this is why Pochettino could be leaving. There's a rebuild there, a mini rebuild, and he knows he needs funds to do it. No one's going to let Tottenham steal their players for cheap anymore because they're Champions League finalists with 100 million coming from just reaching that alone. So now Tottenham are going to have to pay and they're not going to be able to sell as high as they used to. So their model's going to be challenged significantly going forward. It's going to be interesting to see what they do. So it's a window for us. Can we walk through it? Let me just stop you. I'm not so sure.
I don't know that we want our players walking through windows. Is there a door for us? I would prefer if we walk through the door.
Okay, but he's trying to say there's a moment there for us.
I'm just being a dick. It's all I know. It's all I can do. There's a moment. There's an opportunity. Yes.
and by the way, we all want to walk through it, but we're not sure how we're going to do it. Are we going to do it with young, intelligent players? Is it intelligent? Are we going to go young? Are we going to go mid? Are we going to go big?
Yeah.
We don't know. Right? We don't know.
Look, I mean, I'll level with you. Sometimes you look at your club too closely, so you think you're the only club that sucks, and sometimes you look at your club too closely, so you think you're the only club that knows what's going on. I mean, you look at Manchester United, they look like the biggest dumpster fire of all of them. Manchester United is one of the biggest footballing brands in the world. They have one of the biggest stadiums in the world. They have the most money of any team in the world, apart from, oil-backed teams. They're the ones that could most easily turn it around. They could drop £1 billion this summer and be title winners next season if they just got the right coach. I mean, Woodward and Solskjaer are basically the only thing keeping them from being good. Ironically, if you're going to trade places with anyone, you trade places with them. Their path back is easiest. Chelsea have a transfer ban. They're going to lose Hazard, and they have an owner who can't even come to the country anymore. Spurs have to pay off a stadium. Granted, they've got some money, but their owner doesn't want to spend. They're a smaller brand. Their best players are leaving, and Harry Kane probably will never play more than 20 games in a season again because his ankles are made of spaghetti. Thank God for that. And then, you look at us, and, I mean, we don't have a technical director. We fired our scout and promoted a guy who's been there a decade. We have a coach that we're not sure how we feel about. We're trying to recover from 20 years of having the same manager. Our owner probably couldn't tell you the name of the stadium we play in. I mean, it's just, I don't know what to make of it. I think that you've got very lucky with United being shit right now. And the one thing I know for sure is we better do something soon, because that sleeping giant will eventually wake up. They will eventually spend their way to relevance, stumble onto a good manager, and fire Woodward, and they'll be good again. Chelsea and Spurs, I could see them going downhill from here. So, can we consolidate a place in the top four? Well, it starts by winning the Europa League. Tim, before we say goodbye, I want to give you a crack at this. I mean, where do you see that hierarchy right now? I mean, I think these are 4 teams that all have flaws at the club level, fundamental flaws. Do you see us as being at the back of that pack, at the front? I mean, where are we in terms of the sort of good but flawed clubs vying for those positions?
Maybe somewhere in the middle. I think we have the opportunity. I think, Chelsea are going to have a transfer ban and they're going to lose their best player. Gone through very well what's happening with Chelsea and United. United also have an opportunity because they've got more money than we have, even though that I agree with Clive, they're probably slightly behind in that we tried to put a structure in place and it didn't quite work and we've got to build another one, whereas I think United are maybe a year behind on that, but lots of money helps. What they have is a not particularly good or experienced manager, and they're trapped with him because if Ed Woodward sacks him now, he'll probably lose his job himself, because if you're the Glazers, you're going to say, hang on, you went to great lengths to convince us this is the guy, and 6 weeks later you've changed your mind. That's, Ed Woodward's job might be on the line if he does that. So they might be stuck with Solskjaer for a little while. I think that we have the opportunity, but a lot of it is contingent on what we do next. When we get that technical director in and that head of recruitment, and do they work together? I've said many times I'm suspicious about names. I think it's all about the chemistry that you get behind the scenes, and if we can get that, I do think we've got an opportunity. And look, by the way, as well as looking at our competitors, even looking at Man City and Man City and Liverpool, both, 3-4 years into a project, brilliant, top class managers. They're both going to suffer a little bit when they lose those managers. And I'm not saying that time's coming like this summer or even next summer, but it is going to happen. And when it does, they're by definition going to have to replace them with someone inferior, because they're probably the 2 best around. So if Arsenal are sensible and ambitious, they could say, all right, Man City and Liverpool, that's several levels above us at the moment, but the playing field might even in 2 to 3 years. So it's all very contingent on what we do next. I do think we have a big opportunity there, and it will just depend on how things come together a little bit behind the scenes. And so I'm not sure. I'd say we're particularly at the front of that pack, but I think we're a year into a project. We're moving along a little bit, and the next step is just so crucial for us. Yeah,
it's going to sound like hyperbole, but from May 29th to June 1st could be the 4 most important days in the next 10 years for Arsenal Football Club. Because think about this for a second. Let's say we win the Europa League final, we get a European Cup, and we get back into the Champions League. Okay? And let's say Spurs lose. Please fucking God. Spurs go into the summer pretty downtrodden. Their manager maybe leaves. Some of their good players don't re-sign. They take a little bit of a hit, and they're in the Champions League, and they're kind of doing okay in this new stadium, but they are still Spurs. And we are back in the Champions League, and we can attract players with the prestige of that, and we can use that as a platform to build on. Now, let's say it goes the opposite way, and we're back in the Europa League next season, and we end the season losing that game, and the season, as we talked about earlier, winds up looking like a bit of a calamity, and Spurs go on and do the thing that I'm not going to say they do. And they get to say that about their club going forward. And they get to hold that out as a reason to be at their club and to recruit. They suddenly take the mantle of being a big club with a big history and going into a big stadium and going forward have a real platform to build on. And we are stuck back in the Europa League trying to claw our way back into that Champions League bracket to attract players. I think this is a sliding doors moment for the club. I think that it might be hyperbole and I might be overstating it, but those are the kinds of swings that can be multi-season swings to recover from. Paul, I'll let you have a final word on this. I mean, do you think that window of 4 days is as important to the future of our club as I've made it out to be, or that I'm doing the thing I do where I just get hysterical?
Yes, one or the other. It certainly could. It certainly could be. I mean, it's all to play. And, the other factor, I know we all have it in our minds, but right behind the top 6 are a bunch of clubs who made life difficult for certainly the teams 3 to 6. So this is Everton are going to keep spending money. Other clubs, weirdly, will probably have more to spend than Arsenal going to next year because of our financial situation. So teams like Wolves, Watford, Leicester, etc., who have proven to be significant obstacles, are very potentially going to spend more money than us and be asked for less money when they're buying players than we will be, and maybe have more tradable assets. So I think you're right that we could spiral. Well, you can't really spiral up from where we are, but we could get a toehold into the third best team in the rankings. We could drift, but we could certainly drift down. That's why, when we've had conversations around the manager, I do actually think things can get significantly worse and that you can get lost in the Netherlands if you get things wrong right now. So if we can win this Europa League and those horrible, nasty, scummy guys go belly up in the final, then could be quite a turnaround in terms of morale. I actually think that the real issue with the January window was that the ownership didn't want to piss away any more money at that particular moment with that particular backroom lineup when we were getting rid of our head recruiter, when we didn't have a DOF, after Gazidis had got them to spend significant monies on players that in hindsight and on situations that in hindsight did not fix our problem. And I can imagine the Crankies saying, look, you can have more money when you work out how to spend it. Raul is a relationships guy. He's not a Sven Mislintat stand-in. He's not even necessarily really a finance guy. He's not really CEO.
Or someone that should be at the club, or someone that has any qualification to do what he's doing. Yeah, no, I agree with you.
No, I think he's probably key to the direction of the club, but in ways that we don't really think about, all around his relationships within UEFA and the potential Super League and just relationships in general. He's the right guy to have in the mix, but we're missing 2 key people, a recruitment guy and a DOF. And I suspect the Cranky said, listen, you can have money in the summer if you get your shit together and get the right people together. I'm not giving you money unless you can spend it with confidence. So, winning the Europa League puts us in a position where the Crankies may open up the purse strings far more and double down on the extra revenues we get. And then you've got a level of confidence going into the summer, and we get the key signings in terms of the backroom staff. We can push forward. If not, so I do agree with you. We could significantly go in one direction or the other, depending on the Europa League and a couple of other things.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to wrap it up. I want to have one argument with Clive before we do, so we're going to have an argument real quick, Clive, just you and me. We are going to do a whole season review. So like best game, best goal, best player, worst game, worst goal, all those things, things need to improve, things that were great. Letter grade for Emery's performance. We're going to do all of that, and we'll do a transfer look ahead. So that's all coming up. This was sort of a good little a punctuation mark on the end of the season, or a bad one if you hated it. Either way. But Clive, before we say goodbye, I just want to argue with you about one last thing. Rumors popping up, little bit of chatter as we get into transfer season here of Wilfried Zaha being top of our list. You really like that move. I think it would be a really bad decision. So why don't you give me, please, 60 seconds of why you like it. I'll give you my rebuttal and we'll say goodbye.
Man crush.
I like the player. I think he would excite the fans. I also think we've got to stop being snobs about buying from other Premiership clubs. You know, we happily spend the same money on Nicolas Pepe and none of us seen him play live.
I'd spend twice as much on Nicolas Pepe, just FYI.
Yeah, and I just think sometimes we get seduced by that, whereas other teams, a la Liverpool, buy people that are already played in the league, and guess what? They hit the ground running. I think Zaha is a little bit old at 27 for that sort of money, but why does it have to be that sort of money?
He's 26 until he's 27.
Yeah, we need to negotiate. We need to negotiate that price down. I like him because as a Danny Welbeck replacement, he can play wide both sides. He can play in the front two, and he can also play behind the front two, which I think could be his best position as he develops, as he gets older. If we're going to spend money, let's make sure we get people who can do more than one job and play at a pace and a power and intensity and technique that belongs at a top 6 club. And that's what I think we need to be looking at. And if it's not him, it's a player like that to perform that third striker, third midfielder type, third forward or a second forward role. And I think also if we have another striker, it doesn't stop Eddie Nketiah, because then you develop 2 front 2 partnerships. You can mix and match, and Eddie will get more minutes because he can't carry the team on his own, but he could play with one of the other 3 strikers we have at the club. So that means he could actually stay at the club and develop within our walls.
Yeah, and look, I don't think Zaha is a bad player. I think he is probably an upper mid-table kind of player. This is a guy whose best ever season is this season with 10 goals. Okay, 10 goals and whatever it is, 5 or 6 assists. And he's going to be 27 next season, and you're going to pay £50 million to get him, and you're going to pay him £150,000 to £200,000 a week. And then 3 seasons into that contract, or 2 seasons, you're either renegotiating it or selling him for a huge cut rate deal because he's turning 30. So, you know, I think that is a concern. You look at a Nicolas Pepe, who's in his early 20s, just had a 20-goal, 11-assist season on 20 expected goals and 11 expected assists. Zaha had 6 expected goals this season. Now, I realize it's at Palace, so I take him with a grain of salt. He also takes about 2 shots a game. Pepe takes over 3 shots a game. So, like, for me, and before you say Ligue 1 is a farmer's league, okay, well, tell me about the Eredivisie. Is that
I like
I don't
both.
mean you. I'm not saying you. I mean people listening right now. We're like, oh, Ligue 1.
I like both the players. Discussion came out about Zaha today, and I like him. And I think we need...
You mean Pepe?
I like them both.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I like them both, right? The discussion came out about Zaha today, and I think sometimes we're snobs about buying from the club. We need to stop this.
I like the player,
up front, but actually in defence as well. There are multiple fullbacks in the Championship that I think Arsenal could do a lot worse than having a look at. And there are players we need to start thinking more broadly. I've always felt we've been a bit of a closed shop internally within our own country, and I think we need to change that and get people moving in and out of our club rather than going in from abroad and out to abroad, where we just lose money because the market is not there for us. Right?
Sure.
So I think the how we recruit is going to be. It's a whole new podcast, Elliot. But
yeah.
I think we need to make the ground this year has become far less toxic, as Tim alluded to earlier on. And a player like that, or a player like Riyad Mahrez, for example, I know he's not available, but a player like that would do a lot to excite people in the stands. That's what it's all about, right? People enjoy themselves when they're watching the game.
Yeah, and by the way, look, I mean, you look at Sadio Mane, who went from Southampton to Liverpool, and he was a guy who was a 10-goal or 11-goal, 6 assist kind of guy, and you've seen the player he's become. He was much younger then, too. It's not that I don't like Zaha, and we can wrap up here. I think my point is, if we're going to get a guy whose output is not clearly elite, and with Zaha, I don't know that it's clear that he's elite, then we should be buying him pre-prime, because if we spend £50 million on a going on 27-year-old Zaha, we're going to be in the same boat with him that we are with an Ozil and a Mkhitaryan and an Aubameyang, and we already know all those problems. We're not going to win the title. You know what it is, Clive? We're not going to win the title next season, and we're not going to win the title the season after that. I'd like our acquisitions this year to be designed to help this club take the intermediate steps to get to the bigger step. And so buying a guy who over the next 2 to 3 seasons will be done for us and have no sell-on value, I think Zaha's the player you'd buy if you're like, we're one wide forward away from being a title contender. I'm not sure he's the player you buy when you're like, we're kind of a mess. Anyway, let's leave it there, because we're going to do transfers down the road, and we're going to do all kinds of stuff like that. Squad building. We're going to do a season summary. I just had to get that out there because it's been on Twitter quite a bit, and I thought that it was an interesting point, and just wanted to get sort of divergent opinions there. Clive's on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Thank you, Clive.
Thank you very much.
Tim's on Twitter at Stoberto. Tim, before you say goodbye, I just want to say I'm sorry to cut you out of the transfer stuff. I know that is really your bread and butter, and maybe we'll just do a solo Tim transfer podcast just for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
We'll see.
We'll talk to you later.
I'm a sucker for transfer.
I know.
Teams,
hey,
so
everybody's got their specialty. That's what we love about this podcast. Tim's specialty is reasoned analysis that doesn't go into speculation. So thanks, Tim. We'll talk to you soon.
Pleasure.
Paul's is obviously ribbled analogies. Yes, smut. There you go. Thanks, Paul. Paul's on Twitter. Pausing in my pants. Woohoo. All right, my name's Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter. Yankee Gunner gives 5-star review. Write nasty things about all of us. We all deserve it. Or about the manager, or about players. Or just write nasty things. The internet is about taking out your anger on strangers. So we hope you have a fun time doing that. And yeah, look, there's a lot. There's going to be outgoings. We don't know who those are going to be. There's going to be some incomings. We do know one incoming will be my new child. That'll be coming next season. So we'll look forward to that. As I am expecting the birth of my second child sometime during next season. Ever the optimist.
Man.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, ever the optimist.
Closed.
How do you find the time for all these podcasts?
well,
The underwear.
let's be clear. I traveled 21 days in April. When I got back from that trip, my wife told me she was pregnant. So you do the math. We have a very attractive UPS delivery man. In any event,
So many jokes that are just inappropriate right
we'll
now.
do them off air. Our squad is growing. That's all I'll say. In any event, we love you guys. Thank you so much for listening. And those of you on Patreon, we have some stuff coming up this week for you that I think you'll really like. Those of you who aren't, totally understand. We'll have a live YouTube show coming up with Scott. So lots of good stuff ahead. The season is over, but the Europa League awaits. We'll do stuff in advance of that as well. We love you, and we will talk to you most certainly before, but also after Arsenal 10, Chelsea 0.